Hi, everyone. It's good to be with you again, and also it's good to be with John again.
Hey, Johannes.
So I always call John John, and when we meet in two-dimensional space, when I see him in person, he's Professor Vervaeke. So I don't know why. He's very imposing. No, he's not. It's wonderful to have you back, John. I very much look forward to God in the Between, which begins next week. Let me show all of you why we're here. God, I say, call you God again. John is going to go over his new course in a second, the contents of it. I will be the facilitator of this course, which begins when? April the 2nd. That's in exactly 1 week. So there's still some time to join us. There'll be 8 lectures in total, and let me just go over briefly. Oh, yeah, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
hmm
Let me just mention that if you can make at least, let's say, half of the seminars, which all, of course, will be recorded, then you should join the Philosophical Fellowship. There will be live lectures by John and seminars by John, so you can ask him questions. So that's going to start next week. If you really don't have time to join the live lectures, at least I'd say 4 of them, then the self-study tier is ideal for you. And I think there's one left, or maybe so, of the private tutorial with John Vervaeke. There's also a payment plan for the seminar tier down here. So if you'd like to join, that would be great if you head over to the enrollment page and join us. John, first of all, how are you? And second of all, what's this course all about?
Well, I'm good. I'm excited. Johannes, I'm a strong supporter of Halkian and everything that it
Thank you.
stands for and everything you have made it. I think it is uh, properly oriented towards the true, the good, and the beautiful. And so I'm very, very happy. So this course is a way of trying to explore something that has come up repeatedly in some of the discussions I have with people. This
Yeah.
came up. I was leading a retreat recently, and I
Yeah.
proposed a notion from Ursula Goodenough about a new notion of transcendence, not transcendence above and outside, but a transcendence into. And this sort of lines up with this ongoing project I have throughout all of my work in the last few years, which is a sort of reinventio of our participation in the sacred, and where the sacred doesn't involve necessarily that sense of transcending above and beyond and leaving behind, but this sense of transcending in a kind of transcendence that, in fact, breaks down the classical distinction between transcendence and immanence. And the person, to my mind, who is articulating that so powerfully well, and he's doing it from within our experience, is William
Yeah.
Desmond
Yeah.
and his notion of God and the between, where the between is the subjective and the objective, between the immanent and the transcendent, between the one and the many. That this is where we should most properly find the sacred. And we won't find it as some abstract, distant thing, but as something in the very guts of our life. But it's something that is life giving if we can properly reapprehend and re inhabit and orient from it. So, this is the core sort of thing that Desmond's whole project has been about. And I think it aligns so much with cognitive science, and it aligns so much with a lot of the revivals of sort of what I think we could properly now call post academic philosophy. And Halkian is a clear instance of that, where we are returning to philosophy as the love of wisdom and a way of beautifying and cultivating a way of life. And so this is what Desmond is doing really, really powerfully.
Yeah, could you just maybe summarize for people what you mean then by academic philosophy and post-academic philosophy, and how that fits in with the course as well, perhaps?
So first of all, I'm not here to slag the university. I love the University of Toronto. They have treated me very well. I am now being displaying my fealty and loyalty to the University of Toronto until at least until I retire. But what I mean by that is the pursuit of a technique of argumentation and a technique of argumentation and gathering together of propositional theories about what some of the figures in philosophy have talked about, usually organized around problems given to us from the European Enlightenment, the problems of modernity, which are issues of how is knowledge possible, the epistemology, the ethics, and what's left of metaphysics now with the emergence of science. And what that leaves out, and this is in my own experience, is it leaves out, yes, but how is philosophy existentially transformative of people? How does it help them to cultivate virtue and virtuosity? How does it help them to reorient to what really matters, what in themselves, in other people, in the world? How does it help them to see more clearly what it is to be a flourishing human being, and help to realize that in themselves and in the lives they touch? And of course, if you've any of you, I assume, have been, many of you have been, I should say, on Halkyn, and you know that that's how it's being taught here. I mean, obviously, you go through the arguments, you do the hermeneutics, you do the exegesis, but the point isn't some kind of, I don't know what to call it, some kind of propositional summary about what Kant thought. It's more like, can you learn to see the world the way Kant did, and can that make a real existential difference in how you live your life? That's how you. This is how I see you doing philosophy, and that is what I want to be doing in this course.
So transformation is an important word here, or concept, in the sense that that could be used also, of course. It could be meaningless as a term, but something that should change when you read a philosophical text or go through a lecture course, is that you do walk away from it somewhat changed, at least dislodged in your perception of the world and what you think of yourself and others, etc.
Yeah.
And often in academic philosophy, that is lacking. Even if it's the most fiery philosophy you can think of. I, I have a friend in one country or other, doesn't matter who said it to me, but he said it's sad what we do to students. They come in with all this fire, and then after 3 or 4 years, that's basically gone. But then again, when it comes to academic philosophy, of course, there's a lot to it. But you find in William Desmond someone who's been able to, for all his life, he's an academic philosopher, obviously.
Yeah, but he's
But he was
so.
able to maintain the fire, let's say.
Oh, totally. The
Yeah.
fire rips through everything he writes, just and like everybody that reads him or reads people about him. I'll point out the books in a few minutes.
Yeah.
You'll
Yeah.
you'll be touched by that fire. You'll catch fire. Um, and he even is explicit about the fact that he's straddling between the academic disciplines. He's trying to
Yeah.
get to a place.
Like
Uh,
you.
yeah, I guess. And like he sees himself as between theology and philosophy and life, and phenomenology, in this very interesting way. He's going back and rebirthing Plato, very much in
Mm.
line with third way Platonism. That you and I have talked about before, but he's also leaping ahead and trying to propose what will come after, or what is viable for us after the tide of postmodernity is starting to withdraw.
Do you see that withdrawing? That tide of postmodernity? And
I,
what
I
would you describe it? What's your definition of postmodernism or
well,
postmodernism?
I mean, I mean, so the first point is a very good one, and I don't know who said it. I think Desmond echoes it, but he doesn't claim to be original. That one of the few things that holds all the postmodernists together is a hatred of Plato, and I think
Yeah, that's
that demonizing of Plato, making him the villain and the godfather of nihilism, I think is starting to recede, and I think we have a lot of people in third way um, Platonic scholarship to be very,
yeah.
very thankful for that. I think that's one thing. I think the realization that stating that there can be no meta narratives, there was a point to that. There was a point to that. But the problem is it gave birth, at least culturally and politically, to a very horrible, very religious kind of meta narrative that was imposed on a lot of people. Uh,
Hmm.
and we're seeing a lot of political and cultural reaction to that now. from popular media to what governments are being voted out of power. So I think in terms of the kind of unquestioned authority it had, and the way it could sort of censor who we were supposed to listen to, I think its grip on that is starting to recede. And I think what's also being realized is a lot of the things that the postmodernists were speaking about. I can speak in particular. I,
Hmm.
I'm not going to make the argument here. Maybe you and I'll do something where I'll make it. I've
Yeah.
made it publicly at conferences. I think Derrida's notion of difference and my notion of relevance realization are very, very convergent in a lot of ways. And that even comes out a little bit in his debate with John Searle, I think. But I think what's going on in Derrida is there's still what is it Dalton who calls it the semiological reduction, that we're still bound in the textual, and this of course is the antagonism towards Plato's privileging of speech and so forth. And I think what's happening is a lot of people, that torch about
Hmm.
embodiment and embeddedness and difference and all of this, it's actually been taken up in 4E cognitive science, and in ways that connect it with biology, and the revolution that's happening in biology, and it feels much more creative rather than prohibitive or
Hmm.
censorious. That's my sort of take on it.
Great. So thank you. If you anyone who's listening, if you have any questions for John, just let us know in the chat. Here's one that actually would be a good fit right now. So I get his question now. This is Eric. Uh, is there a couple of videos or books that could help us segue into this course? And maybe I'll let you answer that question first.
So there's some videos out there. There's a very good video with this wonderful gentleman and myself sitting in a wonderful park in London talking about this. There's an excellent video with Guy Senstock and myself talking about William Desmond. I'll point out now the books we're going to be using in the course. We're using two, I think, excellent secondary sources from people who are very much, I think, proteges, deep students of William Desmond. You know this because at least one of the book has a foreword from Desmond, sort of putting his stamp of approval on it. The first book is called Religion, Metaphysics, and the Postmodern. That goes towards my previous point. William Desmond and John D. Caputo. Caputo, I think, is the best, or at least one of the best, of the postmodern philosopher theologians of Christianity. His book, by the way, on the mystical element in Heidegger's thought had a deep impact on me.
Yeah.
And so this is Christopher Ben Simpson, and we'll go into this. And this book is really good for sort of a dialogical to and fro between Desmond and probably the best representative of this sort of postmodern turn in philosophy and theology as applied to Christianity, and that's Caputo. Then the second book moves towards praxis, which is, yes, but what would it be like to have a, instead of spiritual exercises, as Sado would say, a way of life that was trying to recover and put into practice what Desmond is talking about. And the second book is this book by Ryan G. Duns Sr., Spiritual Exercises for a Secular Age, Desmond and the Quest for God. And here, what Duns is doing is exactly what his title says. He's going through the work, but he's trying to say, how would this lead into a way of life? And here, the person he's putting Desmond into conversation with is Charles Taylor, and especially Taylor around his recent work around the secular age and what's happening as we pass through sort of the high tide of secularism, what happens to our sense of the sacred. So there's that. And then, of course, along the way, I chose this because Desmond is prolific. He has written a lot. And so instead of choosing one book, this is an excellent anthology put together by Christopher Ben Simpson, The William Desmond Reader, which has great selections on specific topics from William Desmond himself. And so getting the books early and starting to read them, and on the understanding that there's a reason why this is in a course. I hope you will need me to help you through this. But these are good books to start, and those are good videos to take a look at.
So Eric, I was just saying, so I've shared a video, a dialogue between Guy Sengstock and John here in the chat. And just to point this out, John will guide you through these texts, and there's enough time to ask questions and take advantage of being in. So just to explain what we're actually doing, this is not going to be a webinar where John is just speaking into nothingness, basically, digital nothingness. So I'm sitting there too, recording everything. We're going to be meeting in a Zoom room. The first half of the 2-hour meeting will be John presenting his lecture, and the second half is a Q&A or seminar session where you are in a group with others and with John, and John is leading a seminar as he would at university. So that'll be on gallery view, so you get to see everyone else. And of course, you get to ask John direct questions. There's also a course forum, which you can use during the week to stay in touch with your peers. During that time, we'll probably use Discord and maybe my own Halcyon forum, depending what works best. We'll do that next week. So there's enough time for that. So it's going to be very intense for 8 weeks. You'll be in a group of like-minded people who are keen to ask the same questions as you. So as I sometimes joke, all the weirdos can get together in a tiny little virtual room who would never have met otherwise, because one of you is in LA, the other one's somewhere over here, someone's in South Africa, someone's somewhere in Italy perhaps. And you'll find that other people have the same questions as you, maybe not in your immediate surroundings, but thanks to the internet, we can now meet up and make connections that we wouldn't be making otherwise. And under the guidance of John Vervaeke, I think you'll be just fine. You'll learn how to swim in these 8 weeks, I'll say.
Yes, thank you, Johannes. The seminar style is deeply interactive. One of the things I'll be doing is putting Desmond into dialogue not only with Caputo and with Charles Taylor, but also my own work, and also a couple other important thinkers, Stegmeyer, who's done work on orientation, and Hartmut Rosa, who's done work on resonance. So there's going to be lots of connections for you to explore. There's going to be hopefully many different domains. So people might come at this from cognitive science. They might come at it from philosophy. They may come at it from theology. They might come at it from cultural criticism, cultural reflection, even popular cultural studies. This is relevant in an important way.
Have you met Hartmut Rosa? Have you spoken with him?
No, I'd like to.
No, he's very approachable. I had him on a few years ago, 5 years ago, actually.
Well, I'm going to do that. I mean, DC Schindler, David is trying to get me actually in conversation with William Desmond, which I'm trying to do, and a couple other people. We'll see how that works.
Yeah, great. So Hartmut Rosa, Resonance is wonderful. You find a dialogue with him on my channel. So there are people joining in now who have just joined us now. If you have any questions for John, just let us know in the chat. And for those who are joining now, do head over to the enrollment page and join us. We begin exactly in 1 week on April the 2nd,
yes,
which is a Wednesday, as today is also Wednesday. And that'll be at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 6 p.m. UK time. The UK will by then also be in summertime. If you have time for, I would say, at least 4 of the live lectures and seminars out of 8, then do join the Philosophical Fellowship. That means live lectures by John Vervaeke and seminars led also by John Vervaeke. There's no TA. You can ask him your questions and also be in an open discussion with others, of course, as well. If you really don't have time to join us because you're in a different time zone, etc., then perhaps the self-study tier is best. And I think there's one left of the private tutorial with John, so that's an additional hour in private, off the record, etc., with John Vervaeke. And just to mention this also, we are going to record every lecture and every seminar. So with one sign up, you have indefinite or lifetime access to all the recordings, which are going to be published on Teachable, which is the website that you're going to sign up on. So if you head over to that website, which is in the chat here and also in the description of this live stream, then you are signing up with Teachable. And Teachable is an external platform that we use to host our courses, and that allows us to upload the video and of course also the audio files. You can listen back. They've got a wonderful app for the iPhone and also I think for Android that works really well. You can download everything and use, and maybe take it on a flight with you, etc., and listen to those, listen back to the lectures. So you can go back over the courses, this course, as often as you wish, and indefinitely you'll have the recordings. Okay. Do you want to add anything just on that or anything else, John?
No, you're doing great, Johannes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John. Okay, so let's see. So Eric again, but maybe later. What do you think about archetypes? Just why not?
What do I think about archetypes?
Yeah.
I think it is now reasonable to believe that what Jung was on about could be understood in the language of cognitive science. I do think when you get complex systems, they move into given certain parameters, given certain conditions in the environment and in the biology, there's going to be certain attractor states, certain places in the state space, certain ways there's going to be sort of the state space is all the states a system can be in, and there's going to be places that get repeatedly found and are attractors. You've probably heard that the idea of an attractor, and that has to do with just the way reality is unfolding. And I think the archetypes represent that. I think I disagree with Jung in that, although it's not clear because he changes his position, it becomes very fluid towards the end. But the standard of a standard reading of Jung is the archetypes are ultimately biologically grounded, and he has an older model of what that means, very much an instinct kind of model. Given the new biology and given the new ways of thinking about even niche construction, I think it's more proper to think of the archetypes as emerging between, and here's William Desmond, us and the world, and not just being in us in a purely psychological way. I think they are co-created between us in the world in an important way. So that would be my response.
Great. So here's a question from Michael, who emailed me about the course, which is, so how smart and how informed do I need to be for this? Would it be accessible for a philosophical newbie like me? And I have to say, Michael has been to my Kant course and my Plato course and my Aristotle course, so he's not an entire newbie, but he's humble. And I think he can do fine, but...
Yeah, I mean, Michael, given that bit of background, if you were able to do well on those courses, this course will be fine for you. I don't presume a philosophical or an academic philosophical education. I just presume people showing up in philosophical in the ancient sense, good faith. I try to take people through. My lectures are built from that starting point, and they're built by argumentation. Anything I introduce, I explain it. I give people a chance to question about it. I'm not going to be presuming anything. Just show up. And if you showed up as you did for the Kant courses and the Plato courses, you'll do fine. You'll do fine. I'm very confident about that.
I'd say especially Plato and Kant are good preparations for that. But then again, as I always say, when it comes to, you how do you learn how to swim?
Yeah.
That's you have to begin somewhere. And the most important question is, does this speak to me? Is this something that I want to explore further? And that's it. Because we all, and the good thing is about a seminar, so when you sign up and when you join us next week, you'll see that everyone has a bit of a different reading and you learn from everyone else. It's a big echo chamber, but the good kind of echo chamber, where you get to take notes and it changes it's not so much about trying to get all the concepts right or correct, but it's more about the transformation that we witness as we think through what something means, which is basically what really happened also in philosophical or Platonic dialogues. It's never so much just about trying to, what does dikaiosune, what does justice really fully mean? It's There's no one sentence in Plato's Republic where this is the definition of justice. No,
Yeah.
it's the
Yeah.
entire text you have to read to get, oh, the soul has to be in balance in this way, and then this has to be in place, and this has to be in place, and that's justice. But that has to be lived also. You can't just draw it up on a whiteboard and say this is justice. No, you have to live it, and that's what we really want to see, and also I think cultivate in these courses. Is that you are
Exactly.
encouraged to, and this is also a big part of the course. I think is there's a part of it that's devoted to spiritual exercises and practices.
Yep. Yep. Very much. Very much. Um, yeah. I think I don't have much to add to that. That's what I meant by philosophical good faith. If you show up, what's really grabbing you, and you're willing to be exploratory, and you're not looking for easy answers, premature cognitive closure, as they say in the psychological business,
Yeah, yeah,
but you're really open to a kind of complexity, and you're really open to how much the non-propositional, the other ways of knowing, matter to all of this, then that's all that's needed. That's really all that's needed.
yeah. So when you join us next week, you'll see. It's a very friendly arena.
Yeah.
One thing I will say about academic philosophy is there can be a tendency, let's say, to play gotcha.
Yes.
And that can be at conferences and talks you give. And sometimes those gotchas can be really cheap. Something as simple as, why is that even necessary?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, why would you even write that paper? I was reading this. You weren't reading it, first of all.
Yeah.
And this is none of this will happen. So there's no challenging you. Explain this concept to me. No. So we'll try and figure out what the metaxu, the in between, the between space, what that might mean. And what I've seen over the years is that people become really excited about. You Okay, I'll give you one example. We had someone once play jazz drums for us as a presentation, inspired by Parmenides.
That's great.
So that that can happen. Maybe you're a painter, maybe you're a playwright, maybe you're a lawyer. We had a lawyer once a few years ago who found his lifetime writing project with one of the courses. So because it's not confined to getting credit points or getting things correct, but what it generates in us. In again, I think that's the between
Yep.
space itself. So yeah, I hope that Michael can join us. We'll see. Okay, here is Indiana. Are there any parallels among Desmond's work with Christian mysticism and the Kabbalah? So he means Böhme, for example.
Uh, I think there's some very deep parallels. I think what Desmond is doing with his notion of the four kinds of transcendence, but putting it within the metapsychological space. Um, I think it says something very powerful about how we can rehome mysticism within a philosophical framework rather than having it as the somewhat strange esoteric cousin that we don't talk about very much in philosophy. But when we do, we'll create a very safe little space where we'll talk about it. And the problem is that, again, that sort of academic siloing of mysticism and the philosophy of mysticism, often taught by people who have never had a mystical experience in their life, I think is moribund. There is exciting and powerful and experientially and experimentally, like rigorous work now going on. Mysticism is a hot topic in cognitive science. The
Mhm.
psychedelic renaissance is a hot topic outside of even scientific psychology, but even in the psychotherapeutic world. All of this is going, and we need a way of thinking about mysticism that did what Christian mysticism and Kabbalah were doing. They are pointing to the mystical vision and the mystical way of life, but not pointing to something that's the people that are doing the pointing are regarding as really weird or obtuse, or that you have to join a cult to belong to. One of the things that's very powerful, especially about, and I've been learning this a lot about Christian mysticism as I prepare for the philosophical Silk Road, is how unassuming, it's really powerful how unassuming the Christian mystics are, when they talk about, for one thing, they don't go on and on like we do about how wonderful their and autobiographical their mystical experiences are. They don't care about that. They just use it to read the Bible better, or they use it better to get Plato and the Bible to talk to each other. It's much more naturally flowing into their practice than a topic that they put up on their ego shelf and say, look at how wonderful and special I am because I've had this mystical experience. And I think that's very, very important. There has been a commodification of mysticism
Mm.
that is very detrimental to its spirit. And I think Desmond does a lot to welcome mysticism back into, and in a proper way, into the fold of our lives and in the structure of how we try to see more clearly into ourselves, into each other, and into reality. There's no deep break between the philosophical and the mystical in Desmond. You can't say, oh, here's where he passes from the philosophical into the mystical, or something like that. And in that way, he's very much like Plato and the Neoplatonists that he admires.
Excellent, thank you. John Turner asks, as a robust or sound metaphysics may dispose one or position one at the threshold of the gift of faith, that's a very well formulated question. How would you characterize Desmond's work in this respect and dealt with in the course? Well, I hope that you join us, John.
That I agree. You should join us. I'm going to almost say it's like a moral imperative given that question. Uh, but to be more serious now, I mean, what's really interesting about Desmond is how he, I'm going to try and be fair, and I won't have as much time as I will in the course. Desmond is very friendly to Christianity. He gets people to, he sort of takes people to the threshold of it, but he doesn't himself proclaim Christianity or even identify with Christianity. It's this very interesting thing. Faith is a very important topic to him. For him, it's more like, he often uses languages like second astonishment, and the sense of really deeply connected into a community of being, a common unity of being. And I think that's an important way of trying to get at what faith is. And again, he tries to rebalance the relationship between theology and philosophy. So in the medieval world, theology is primary, it's the queen of the sciences, and philosophy is the handmaiden. And then post Descartes and Kant, it goes like this, it inverts, and he's trying to get them back like this. He's trying to get them back like this, neither the medieval nor the modern. And I think that's relevant and important. Third, Desmond is very crucial for this project that I am engaged in, which is the philosophical Silk Road, of trying to properly move into an appreciation of pluralism. And I don't mean by that the following things. I don't mean imperialism, which is my religion will conquer yours. I don't mean incrementalism, which is your religion is a immature version of mine and you'll get to me someday. I don't mean simple liberal tolerance, liberalism. We all believe, and isn't it nice that we believe? It means something deep like that happens in these courses, a dialogical mutual transformation that isn't the same thing as everybody joining the same club. And Desmond's work epitomizes that. And I think we need that right now. I think the standard models we've had for global civilizations, the attempt to philosophically appreciate and appropriate the reality of globalism, have been noxious. I think they've been noxious. And I don't think globalism is going away, even if we go through various trade wars. I don't think that's going to go away. And I think we can't forget that outside of Christianity, there are people of good faith living good lives in Vedanta or in Zen. I think we can't forget that anymore. And I think we can't pretend. And so Desmond, I think, is addressing a question that many people of good faith, including many Christians, because I know because I'm reading them and studying them, are trying to ask this question: what does faith mean when we move into a proper pluralism, where we move into that we've given up being triumphant or imperialistic, we've given up being condescending incrementalist, given up being sort of indifferent, liberals, and we actually move into I have to take the stance that I'm going to learn something really important from you. And Desmond puts us into that space. That's exactly what the metaxu is. It doesn't mean we'll all agree with him. It doesn't mean we will all become Christians. But it means we will confront something that I think is philosophically pertinent, and that the powers that be are not helping at all to address. We get either violent tribalisms, we get weak need, World Economic Forum globalisms, and all kinds of weird nostalgias and utopias. None of this is happening. And I think Desmond can actually help. He's obviously not good, sufficient, but I really believe he can help. And I think this is one of the great challenge for faith going forward. How can we have faith without drifting into imperialism, relativism, liberalism, incrementalism? And he, I think, provides a very powerful way of thinking in order to help address that really pertinent, philosophical, in the broad sense, question.
Thank you very much. Here's one that maybe is along those lines. So, John, John Turner, that is, when you join us next week, I look forward to that. This is Victor Stoic from Brazil. I know that much. How does Desmond's notion of agape respond to critiques from the global south, where the gift of being often feels more like expropriation than generosity?
Yes, Victor, and I was able to glance at some of the other excellent questions you have posed, and um, there's a question in there about the metaxu and the realities of violence, and you're now pointing here to the reality of exploitation and abuse, um, and Desmond is really, really sensitive about these issues. I don't mean in the pejorative sense. He's really aware that we can't have that kind of rose tinted, I'll just say rose tinted glasses about agape or the sacred anymore. So he proposes, I won't get into all the details, he proposes the dialogical as, or the metaxological as that which is beyond the Hegelian dialectic. And the idea here is, and I think he proposes that it's a recovery of the Platonic dialectic, but that's an aside. Um, so his criticism, and whether or not this is totally just of Hegel, is beside the point. I don't need that to be the case to answer your question. The idea that what happens in the dialectic is you get the folding back of the other and the different into the system, and again, there's a lot going on in my head, and I'm very rapidly trying to decide what to say and what not to say. What Desmond proposes is that has lost the dialogical, that has lost a genuine lived, that's not quite the right adjective, but a genuine lived vulnerability to the true otherness of the other that was so pronounced in postmodernism, one of the things that postmodernism did, and to the fact that um, that we have got to listen as much as we speak. There's, if you'll allow me, and Johannes will probably object a little bit. So I know I'm being oversimplistic, but I'm just going to ask for a bit of charity. I don't get that much, and I'm reading a lot of Hegel and reading a lot of people on Hegel, like Brandom and others, right? Pritchard and others, right? I don't get the sense of the sacred listening that I get in Desmond. I get the sense of a wonderfully expanding speech or language or thought, um, that is folding the silence back into itself and is responding to it. But that's not the same. I mean, that's not the same thing as like when you're with your beloved. I'm not trying to fold Sarah back into the system. I'm trying to be open dialogically to how she can challenge me, and challenge the way I have, perhaps unconsciously, or perhaps, to your point, deliberately privileged myself, put myself into a position of exploitation or control. And so Desmond is very much very conscious. He's one of the best, and I mean this, and he takes it seriously. He says most people are crap at criticizing Hegel because they don't realize how smart he is. Desmond is one of the most thorough and careful critics of Hegel. And that comes through in that how he tries to make himself open and responsive, um, to a kind of sacred listening, a holy listening that does not ignore the ways in which we are always tempted to totalization, and to a kind of silencing. Um, and I know I've probably irked you a little bit, Johannes, because I'm
No. I'm not a Hegelian. No, don't worry. No, there is no, we're not going to have. We'll have that some other time. We should probably do a Hegel dialogue just for
yeah,
the fun
yeah,
of it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Really at some point. But yeah, he's a child of his time,
Of course,
obviously. So
I'm not. There's two different things here. There was one would be the totally unfair anachronistic criticism of Hegel, which we should never do. The other would be my attempt to answer the question, which is something different, and that's what I was trying to do.
yeah. Okay, maybe let's do this. Why don't you give us the 10 points or the 3 points or the 5 points, or just no, really the reasons why you think people should join this course, who the course is for, and what they might learn before we send you off and leave you to be back to your work.
I this is my work too.
I know.
Um, I think I mean I name it one way. Other people name it other ways. You know, Emil Gilchrist and other people. I won't go through all the usual suspects. Um, I think we're all living in the recession. It's funny because I always think of Matthew Arnold's Dover Beach, and he's living, the tides coming in, and he's living about with how the sea of faith is receding. But I think there's a different thing that's receding right now. I think modernity and what it meant is receding. And I think it's receding because of many different critiques, not just the postmodern critique.
Yeah.
But there was critiques within analytic philosophy itself. There's critiques from what's happening in science, especially the scientific revolution that's happening in biology and in cognitive science.
Yeah.
Go on. But the problem with that is we are still in the rain shadow of modernity, which, and I agree with the broadly Heideggerian proposal that it's been the history of nihilism. It's put us into a nihilistic place. And then the recession of modernity is not helping. It's making it more stark. So you see things like that movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once, where people are suddenly, right, they're not protected by the mythos of modernity, and then they're now more exposed to the dark side of it, and the cosmic insignificance and all the other things that beset us. And so I think people who are wrestling with this,
Yeah.
would need discourse. I think one of the things that's happening, and I see this all around the world, and I talk to many people about it, is there's like an advent of the sacred. The sacred, our sense of the sacred, our experience of the sacred, our orientation towards it is being reborn in a way that's taking on a life of its own. Remember what I just said a few minutes ago. And it's challenging us, and we need to we can't manufacture it. If we think we can manufacture the sacred, we are rolling back into the titanic totalitarian utopias that drenched the world in blood in the 20th century. But we can prepare for it. And I think, right, and again, that doesn't mean something which you would recognize as an institutional religion. I'm talking about a fundamental reorientation that helps us move past, right, this double legacy of modernity and nihilism, and then the collapse of modernity and the making more stark of the nihilism that was within its guts. And I think this course can help that. I think this course is very good for people who are interested in how philosophy and theology and science should be talking to each other again after all the centuries in which they have been isolated from each other and subject to many of the problems that Johannes and I have been pointing out. There's a lot of reasons, and I think those are just three really important reasons why this course matters to you. And you may think, well, I don't think about those things very often. The job of philosophy isn't to make you think about things you don't want to think about. The job of philosophy is to get you to realize there's things you want to think about, but you haven't realized that yet. That's a different thing. And that's what this course is going to endeavor to do.
Excellent. Thank you very much. By the way, here's John Turner again. I think this was in response to your response to his question, which was this. Thank you, John. Sounds like that was in the wheelhouse. So
Yes,
thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you, John Turner. Hope you can join us. So again, we begin in exactly 1 week. Let me explain to you again what this is if you've not done a course with us before. This is an online course which is going to be live. That means John is going to teach a new course exclusively put together for you. And there are going to be 8 lectures in total. All of those lectures will be recorded. This will be in a Zoom meeting that you'll be a participant of. And after the live lecture, there will be a group discussion in which you can participate and you will ask questions. You will respond to what someone else might have said. You'll be taking notes. And of course, the recordings of both the lecture and the seminar will be made available on Teachable, which is that website that you're seeing here. That's the landing page of the course. So you scroll down, you find a course overview, you find the seminar dates here, the time, which is 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. UK time. If you're in Europe, that's 7 p.m. in Central Europe. If you have time for, I would say, at least 4 of the lectures and seminars, this is the tier for you, the Philosophical Fellowship. Self-study is for you if you don't have time for the live lectures. So everything will be recorded, as I said before, so you get access to that. And I think the good thing is you listen to the lecture, you've done a bit of the reading, you know, after we upload everything, you can listen back during the week as you would maybe to a podcast on the way to work or during a break. And so you can refresh your mind what was discussed, then go over the reading again for the next week and do that whole spiel for 8 weeks. And after 8 weeks, you'll have grasped some of the most important concepts in Desmond's philosophy and others, John Caputo, Charles Taylor, etc. But also, I think importantly, it'll show you that there are other ways of thinking that perhaps are not so prevalent in our everyday lives. There's also a payment plan for the Philosophical Fellowship, 3 monthly payments. If you would like to take advantage of those, that's fine. Just click on enroll now. It takes you to a page where you can use your credit card or I think also PayPal or Google Pay. So once that's done, you're in the back end and you'll see a list of all lectures and the contents will be added as we go through the course, which again begins next week, Wednesday, April the 2nd. So join us now. We look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Johannes.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, John. Thanks everyone for listening. If you know anyone interested in this kind of philosophy, in this way of thinking, in this way of doing philosophy, not for the sake of doing philosophy, but philosophy as a way of life, please feel free to share also this live stream with your friends and maybe make them aware of the course as well. That would be wonderful. So again, thank you very much, John. Thank you everyone who was listening, and see you next week. I say good night because it's quite late here. You say good afternoon or good day.
Yeah. Good day.